Good morning. So, many of you are probably familiar with the Conor McGregor story. There's always many around him, right? But the political sort of story where Conor was trying to explain to the American press and to the world from the White House the dire straits that Ireland is in, right? The travesty, to use his word, that is being foisted upon the Irish people, right? And there's people that just don't like Conor McGregor, right? For whatever reason. And I'm an MMA fan, right? So I followed his career through that, right? His rise. I've seen his rise. I've followed it with a great degree of interest because he's an Irish guy at the top of his game, right? And how often do we get that? But my first reaction to Conor McGregor, and this is my own biases, my own prejudice, right? Is, or was, here's the dub, right? Here's the dub. But then when I seen him fight, I went, wow, this is something that is very rarely seen. The movement, the timing, the precision, the fluidity, right? He was excellent. So my bias went out the window because I recognized and respected what he could do and his ability to speak as well. And from day one as well, this should not be forgotten. He has always included Ireland in everything he does, right? And we were happy to accept that when he's doing great, right? But as we do, we devour our own in this country, right? If you get to a certain point and you're deemed not to be pristine, then you become a public embarrassment to people. So we devour them and we chew them up and spit them out, right? That's what we do to great people in this country, or people, Irish people who achieve a level of greatness. But the point on this is that people would have had positions on Conor McGregor, automatic positions, okay, as I did. And it'd be very hard to change these people's minds. It's very hard to change an Irish person's mind, right? Because I don't think that we fully understand how we got to that position in the first place. We tend to filter the world through our own personal emotions and feelings towards things, right? We're not a very reasonable bunch, right? We tend to do things not to hurt people or not to provoke any negative feedback or sentiment or feeling from society, right? Instead of aiming at things and doing them because we value them truly and we see them to be true, right? We're emotional and we're feeling based people more than we are deep thinkers or systematic thinkers or logical thinkers. And that's fine, right? Because there's a time and a place for both, and balance is always the key, right? The middle path. So with what Conor McGregor came out and said, he told the truth, right? And he also put words to feelings that many, many, many Irish people are burdened with today. So he may have got some supporters for people who, again, probably not because he's speaking the truth, but because he's echoing something that I feel myself. This is an important distinction with Irish people, right? Because it goes a bit of the way towards explaining how lost we can get and how easily manipulated we are, right? So he may have garnered some extra support or additional supporters. He may also, I would imagine, and you can see it, he aggravated people who may have been a little bit indifferent to him or may not have liked him anyway, right? So he may have aggravated those people. Funnily, a few days after that, there was a story in the newspaper, one of the Irish papers, stating that the DPP, the Director of Personal Prosecutions or Public Prosecutions, whatever, so they were deciding whether there was going to be criminal charges lodged against Conor McGregor for a tweet that he put out prior to the stabbings in Ireland, right, where you had buses burnt and stuff that night in Dublin. under the guise, I suppose, of inciting hatred, right? These things aren't coincidental, okay? Very little sympathy for Conor McGregor people have shown, and very few people shown that they would have his back and be willing to support him verbally and publicly, right? Unless you're those people that will, and then, right, I'm talking about like newcomers, right? But when you couple that story with, is it Gary Noone, the comedian guy, the big funny fella, you know what I'm on about, right? An Irish comedian who makes videos kind of satirising Irish experience, lived experience, and Irish tendencies, right? Pokes fun at himself and at Irish people. Grand. Aren't we great at that, right? Aren't we famous for it even? Into the all ha-ha. Fine, he is funny and he does his thing well, and more power to him, right? But he came out essentially saying, look, I'm in agreement, perhaps not with the wording of what Conor McGregor said, but Ireland has an immigration problem and people devour them, right? But then people swung back around. People who would throw Conor McGregor under the bus for what his views are, then swung around and started kind of pallying up to Gary Noone. And my point on that is, particularly when talking about Irish people, or specifically when talking about Irish people, is essentially, if I like you, I will support you. And if I don't like you, then I can't support you. Right? Regardless of what the phrasing is, or what the wording is, or what the facts are in relation to a thing, right? Because I would guarantee you, Conor McGregor could come out and speak the absolute 100% verifiable truth. And Gary Noone could come out and give a half justified statement. Kind of half right, but wrong in ways, right? And people would still show more sympathy, and so show more alliance or support to Gary Noone because they like him, right? Because he's a harmless fella, right? He's he's not threatening. He seems very gentle. He suffers with anxiety, right? Apparently he's agoraphobic. He's a little bit timid, harmless guy, right? And a little bit funny. So he will garner more support than Conor McGregor could ever hope to, because Conor tends to be the opposite of that, right? Bit sure of himself, if not very sure of himself, confident, brash a little bit, direct speaking, doesn't really dress things up, right? Again, a dub, right? And all of that dub attitude and energy that comes along with that. And Irish people don't like that. We have a strong tendency towards not liking that, right? And this is back to my point earlier of how we're so easily manipulated, because we operate on sentiment. How I feel about this person will influence how I respond to what they say. And we all have this. This is a very human tendency. But with Irish people, it tends to be dominant, right? It tends to be dominant. And I've had conversations with people, and Trump is a great example of it. So they'll talk about not liking him, and they give the myriad of reasons that we've all heard over the last few years. It's always the same reasons, right? There's never any individualized take on it, right? It's always, sure, didn't he do this? And then you might explain, well, would you like this to be good? Would this be a good in society? Yeah. Well, he's done this. Yeah, well, look, no, I just can't stand him. It's like you're dealing with people that can't explain how they arrived at the conclusion they've arrived at. They just know that they're there. And they kind of use the conclusion as a justification for the conclusion. It's like, but sure, ain't he awful? That's why I don't like him, because he's awful. And because he's awful, I can't like him. Right? So we tend to create irredeemable situations and scenarios for people. Because we can't understand how we arrived at a conclusion. We don't know how that person can ever get out of the bracketing or the labeling or the categorization that we've put them into. We don't know what they could do to redeem themselves because we've no idea how they ended up in that category altogether from ourselves, right? We don't understand ourselves. We just know that for whatever reason, there tends to be a mist hovering over a crowd, right? Just silently falling and landing on people without them realizing it. We kind of have absorbed the social consensus, right? That Conor McGregor is a terrible person, or Donald Trump is a terrible person. But Gary Noone, who says the same thing as Conor McGregor, he's a good person and we should pity him because people are being mean to him. But fuck Conor McGregor and he should go to jail, or he should whatever, right? So we're weird people because we're overly sentimental, or we see the world, or we experience our own experience predominantly through our feelings and through our sentiment. And we marshal ourselves and we govern ourselves based on what we believe is the social consensus on any given topic. So we snooker ourselves in two ways. We're heavily socially conformist, and we also arrive at conclusions based on our feelings, right? Based on how we feel about a person. So, and what this ends up doing, as I said, is cutting anybody off from having the ability to redeem themselves by being factually correct about anything. Because that's not how we arrive at our decisions about people. It's nearly irrelevant what they say. Sure, you know yourself. That kind of thing. What you're dealing with there is people that have no understanding. They've no intelligence about how they arrive at their own conclusions about things. They just know that here we are at this conclusion. And therefore, Gary needs to be protected, Conor needs to die. This sort of thing. Right? Even though they're both saying the same thing. And that is an issue with Irish people. The ability to understand yourself, to be aware of yourself, and to engage in ruthless conflict with yourself about how it is that you make your decisions and you draw your conclusions on things, and on people especially, right? I think Sigmund Freud said it, that, or he's said to have said it, that the Irish people would be, psychoanalysis would be lost on the Irish people, right? I think his point being that we live in a sort of mythic realm, right? We live in the world of our own total subjective experience, and we kind of don't pay attention to anything that could be influencing that. We're just pulled and dragged according to what it is we feel about a certain thing, and there's a beauty and a romance in that. But in certain ages and at certain times, this is incredibly destructive to people, and it renders Irish society in a state where there's a growing, I think they're the minority of people, right? But there's a significant number of them that you simply cannot have a conversation with unless you agree with them. Or unless you, not even agree, unless you share the same feelings about what it is you're speaking about. You can't relate to them. And they have no interest in relating to you because they don't understand you. When you start asking questions as to how you came to this conclusion, some people will throw their hands up and just say, I don't know what you're on about. That's incredibly dangerous. And these are people that make decisions about your life, right? These people have the same power and their vote has the same sway and the same relevance as people who think on these things profoundly and have a great understanding of themselves, right? So we're kind of locked into that because we're locked into each other and we only have each other. But what do you do then when the people whose hands your life and your family's life is in or are in, and vice versa, when you can't talk to them anymore? They've no interest in seeing reason. They're just entrenched in their feeling about something, and what the truth or the validity of what's been said by that person has no bearing on it. It's irrelevant to them. It's irrelevant because this is how dissociated a lot of Irish people are, right? They could tell you, look, Conor McGregor over there now making a show of us. Who brought him over there, right? Grand. You don't like him, do you not? No, I can't stand him. Can't stand him. Okay. I know you don't like him, you can't stand him, and that's fine. But what do you think about what he said? What did he say? Oh, well, he's saying that what's going on in the country with the importation of all these people and Irish people not being treated well, right? Not getting preferential treatment in their own homeland. Villages being dumped and overran by people who are just brought here. What do you think of that? Oh, yeah, well... yeah, you can see that, sure. Didn't it happen down the road? That's what's going on down the road, isn't it? Yeah. So would you vote for Conor McGregor? No, I can't stand him. Okay. Here you are. And what we love about this Irish people, it's great because it's a full self-fulfilling prophecy, right? It's the Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail, right? It goes on and on and on, a feedback mechanism. We get to play dumb. We get to live dumb, totally oblivious to how we come to our conclusions. We get to be taken advantage of by people that we vote in. But the gift of that is the government know that we know what they're like. We know what the government are like. But the price or the trade-off is all those years or decades or centuries of animosity and angst and hatred and self-loathing, right? We get to channel that at the government. We just have to vote for it first. So we get to complain about it for 3, 4, 5 years, right? And that releases people. It takes the steam out of people. It gives them something to give out about. But then when you actually sit down and say, right, well, look, Irish people nearly born into their marrow, right? Or they're even born with it in their marrow, understand that politicians are corrupt. I remember knowing that as a child, probably before I even knew what the word corrupt was. You'd hear it. Not from an overtly political background at all. But you understand this. We understood this growing up. Don't trust politicians. You can't trust them, right? Look at how they perform. Listen to how they speak, right? You can't have a smile for everybody. That's not real, right? Who goes around smiling and shaking everyone's hand? That's not real, right? So you kind of grow up understanding this and knowing this. And every single person, I guarantee you, if you ask every Irish person that you ever meet, do you think politicians are corrupt? They'll say, absolutely, of course they are. Okay. So would you not rather vote for someone who's speaking out against this level of corruption? No, sure, I can't stand them. Right? Bizarre stuff. And we need a serious self-evaluation of ourselves as individuals, but also as communities, because we shackle ourselves in by what we think, what we believe other people, or what we believe about how other people view things, and we chain ourselves in that regard. But when you sit down and have a chat with people one-on-one, they'll agree with you. So either they're liars and they're just agreeing with you for the sake of not getting into an argument with you, which could be the case, probably is the case. Or number two, we just have no interest in trying to break that social conformity, right? And we continue parading around the place, pretending to be the best boys in public. And then we'll have a completely different conversation at the dinner table. That screams incoherent to me. That screams incoherent to me. If you were speaking with a client, right, as a therapist, and you're speaking with a client, and they're describing to you how they have very, very different opinions based on who they're around. So when they're in public, they'll have one set of beliefs and opinions. But then when they're in private, they'll have a different set of opinions and beliefs. You'd say to that person, of course you have anxiety. You're living two lives. You're one person. You're not unified. There's no middle path, right? You're all over the place. You're not centered in yourself. And people can understand that, right? But then when it comes to a nation, the same doesn't seem to apply to people, or the reason and logic goes out the window. But the same does apply. If you have a society or a nation of people that are totally schizoid in how they carry themselves, how do you expect any sort of stability or any sort of coherence from the politicians all the way down to the people, right? Because we do the same thing with politicians. Oh yeah, I know he's corrupt, like, but he got the road fixed there. Right. He always looked after us there. But did he not rob hundreds of thousands of euros out of whatever? Oh, he did. I'm sure he did. I'm sure he took more. Don't cute whore. Right? Bizarre. But because we've somewhat of a personal preference and based on something that this person might have done, we give them the thumbs up, knowing full well that they're criminals. Again, schizoid. Irish people are totally schizoid in how they carry themselves in nearly all of their life. And we wonder why we kill ourselves at such rates, why we have such high rates of addiction, why we have such high rates of self-harm and suicide, right? Why we all want to get out of here. We never reflect on that. We only ever want to see the good in it. So aren't we good crack? Do you know who's always good crack down the pub? The fella that hangs himself. Always. You always hear it. Ah, Jesus, I didn't see that coming. Sure, he was only there Friday. He was some buzz off him. Right? That's what we are. We're a nation of people who have created a rope, a noose, out of our own self-deception. And we walk around with that noose on our neck all the time. And we give the handle of it, right? Like a dog in a lead. We give the handle of it to people we don't know. And say, look, if I'm out of line, give me a pull. That's what we do. Bizarre human beings. Bizarre people. And I suppose identifying the problem is halfway towards the solution. But whether Irish people have any real interest in that, I don't know. Certainly, look, things change and there are positive markers in Irish society, right? People don't tend to be drinking as much anymore. That could be down to the pubs being closed or whatever the case is, right? But Irish people look like they're looking after themselves a little bit more, which is positive, right? But psychologically, we're still the same. We're still the same. If I like you, I'll support you, regardless. If I don't like you, I can never support you, regardless.